Hello, everyone, again. Thank you for joining us for this session on energy security this time at Bucharest Forum. It is my pleasure to welcome our distinguished guest that will join us today to talk about the challenges of energy and of energy security, but also of the energy sector considering the current pandemic that we are all going through. And obviously, considering what we were talking about before March, before February this year, we were thinking about interconnectivity. We were thinking about energy poverty. We were also thinking about how we could go greener in terms of negotiating the Green Deal at the European Union level. And all of that, considering also the geopolitical challenges that we were facing at the time, obviously considering our dependence, European Union's dependence on energy imports, of Russian imports in energy, but not only that, we were trying to take a long-term look at the challenges ahead by looking at the climate change. So I will start this with this introduction. I will start with an opening question of what are the current challenges for you all? And because it is technology, and because I have to call on people, I would like to start with Mr. Bogdan Kiritsoiu as a representative of the Romanian authority in the energy field, but not only in the energy field, to tell us what he believes to be the challenges in the energy field related to energy security for us in Romania and in Europe now. You have to demute your mic, I think. I don't hear you.
Okay.
Well,
now,
obviously yes. The challenge of technology was crossed.
Very good. Yeah. At least, yeah. The first one we passed. Okay. I was trying to reflect to the points that you mentioned in your email, and to be honest, I think there is not so much of a change that the pandemic has brought in terms of direction of where Europe is going. This may be good or bad, I don't know, this inertia. We could see a positive thing that we are not easily derailed. Before the pandemic, I expected that the economic crisis will have a rethinking, a pause for thinking. I don't see it happening. I think we are more going to do what we are anyway going to do. The one thing that maybe it's clearer now that is that we are not going to.
I think you will have to repeat this question because I'm having troubles hearing you, and I think the others too. The last sentence.
So, but I'll say that Europe is not going to carry the whole world. We are going to go quicker than the rest of the world in promoting the energy transition. And this raises an issue about our competitiveness. So what I see happening, it's more effort to protect the European internal market from competition coming from outside, And this means that we are going to screen foreign direct investments that come into Europe. We are going to have some protection against companies that receive state aid, which is not our rules in their home countries. And we are going probably to introduce some taxation against goods which use cheaper energy and dirtier energy than what we have in Europe. So I think that's the reaction that goes with this energy transition. We can defend our internal market. It's strong enough. Not going to solve our competitive problem yet.
You're starting to cut off again for me.
So we'll use this leverage to try to force to convince other economies, other jurisdictions to apply similar rules to ours. I see from your face that not much from what I've said crossed.
Well, the very final conclusion that we are going to try to convince others to do as we do, and we're going to facilitate energy transition in the very same way that we started actually before the pandemic, was very much clear, at least to me. And I would say that 80% of what you said was...
It's going to be the stick. If you want access to the EU market, then you have to have rules more or less similar with ours.
Got it. So in terms of facilitating trade and not only trade, but also investment with other parts, we are going to build ourselves stronger internally. I will actually ask Mr. Mayet to tell us the vision from Brussels as the head of DG Energy, and tell us what is the overall vision with regards to the internal market, with regards with what Mr. Kiritsoiu just told us, but also obviously comment on the challenges that you are seeing from Brussels.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation. In fact, the mission of the Director General for Energy I'm from is to ensure access to secure, affordable, and clean energy for all Europeans. And to reply to your questions, let me say first that the pandemic COVID-19 in Europe has not caused any supply disruptions. And in a way, we have to see that as a success of the internal market, of the member states' preparedness, of the EU framework as a whole. I must say that it has required a lot of work. First, for the operators who had the operators of critical energy infrastructure, who had to implement exceptional business arrangements to ensure the continuity of their operations while protecting the health of their workers. It has required a lot of work also to make sure that the market could function properly. The crisis drastically reduced the energy demand up to 25% in certain member states, while affecting the supply, and we could see that the share of renewable energy sources reached historic peaks. But it worked well, and the market, the internal market, could absorb this shock of demand. At regulatory level also, in spite of the lockdowns, member states working together with the Commission could also preserve the mobility of the critical energy workers, including across borders, which was very important. And now we could also see that the EU framework on energy security was efficient because member states can rely on jointly developed risk assessment plans, cross-border coordination at different levels, and solidarity between member states to supply customers with gas or electricity should the crisis happen. And at institutional level, we had very intense exchanges at technical level with the European electricity, gas and oil cooperation groups, with the European nuclear safety regulators groups, and also at political level. The energy ministers discussed twice the situation of the COVID-19 crisis and its impact on the energy sector in April and June this year. In fact, to take stock of all those exchanges, the Commission has published a guide to 20 good practices to address energy security risks related to a pandemic like COVID-19, and that's available in different languages on our website. One of the lessons learned from those different discussions is that the EU needs to reinforce the resilience of the critical supply chains of technologies to repair the grid or install new generation facilities. And now we are analyzing this question and discussing it with member states and operators. Now, if we turn to the aftermath of the crisis, I think that, as already said by the President, the first point is that the recovery is the opportunity not to return to old habits, but to accelerate the European Green Deal towards a carbon neutral Europe by mid-century. And a few weeks ago, the Commission proposed the climate target plan to reduce emissions by at least 55% by 2030. And it goes hand in hand with a better energy security. It will double the share of renewable electricity production from today's level of 32% to 65% by 2030. And I must say that Romania is already home to one of the largest European onshore wind complex in the province of Dobroja. And there is a high potential also in the Black Sea. And now we have to make sure that for investments to take place in the Black Sea, a predictable and stable framework is needed. And here the Commission has an ongoing dialogue with the Romanian authorities to set this right legislative framework. Second aspect for the aftermath of the crisis is that now we have a new EU Security Union strategy, which was adopted in July to tackle internal and external threats. And this European strategy focuses on areas where the EU can really bring value to support member states. And one of the areas is the energy sector. And this strategy announced two new actions specific to the energy sector. The first is to enhance the physical and cyber security of critical energy infrastructure. And the second is a network code on the cyber security of cross-border electricity flows. And finally, and I think that's a very important point, exceptional circumstances means exceptional financial instruments agreed by the European Council. And the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which is one of those new instruments, will help member states to recover. It means 310 billion euro of grants available to the 27 member states from 2021 to 2023. And that to support, to accelerate their green and digital transition. And it is very important to make the best of this new facility through a well-designed national Romanian recovery and resilience plan. So let me conclude just by stressing that the resilience of the EU energy, the energy security, fundamentally, in fact, it's about cooperation and solidarity among member states through the European Union. And as President von der Leyen stated in March, at the peak of the crisis, Europe should act with one big heart and not 27 small ones.
I'm going to turn back to that final point, I hope, in the second round of questions. Thank you for giving us the overview on the European Union energy security, I would say, and not only challenges, but what we are thinking to do next. And I will turn now to the business sector. Mrs. Camelia Ene is coming from the very business sector of a company. She's a representative of a mall in Romania. And since I have her here, instead of asking her about the overall politics and regulatory market, I'm going to ask her, how did a company that I assume was challenged with the pandemic, considering the degree of the business operations that a company like hers had. How did you overcome the pandemic so far? What challenges have you seen, including challenges from the regulatory um, uh, framework, let's say, but also what kind of opportunities did you see in this crisis? Because we all say, at least in the realm of analysts and political thinkers, we all say that a crisis is a big opportunity. Has this been a big opportunity for the business sector? And the same question will actually go to Mr. Iskander, which is pretty much in the very same line of business. So I would like you to comment on the very practical aspects of where we are now.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. I hope that you can hear me. I understand, yes. Okay. So, the oil and gas industry has been in a clear process of transformation for several years already. But if we are to refer to the long-term impact, what we can say about the current crisis is that rather than setting a new trajectory, it has somehow accelerated trends that were already underway. This crisis has shown us very clearly that the future will be strongly anchored in the digital area, regardless of the industry in which we are operating. Technology was during this period perhaps the most reliable ally of the businesses, and for us it was the confirmation that the investment made at the level of MOL Group and MOL Romania in the segment in the recent years have been the result of correct strategy. MOL Romania ensured the reliable supply to the customers even at the very depth of the crisis, and diversified our products and services portfolio based on the demands and on the customer behavior changing during this period. We adopted the type protection measures in order to keep both our employees and the customers to be safe. This was the top priority of our management while maintaining the business operational. Undoubtedly, I could say that this crisis will be somehow a catalyst for a change on all levels, and I'm referring here to economic, to corporate, social, and even personal, at a scale that I think that we haven't seen in decades. As relates to the opportunities, because we are considering that there are a lot of opportunities that we can also touch. I think that one thing that we have learned during the 25 years journeys that we are having in Romania, because this year we are celebrating 25 years since MOL Group has entered on the Romanian market, and what can I say is that our industry is not only highly competitive economic sector, but is also an industry that is transforming at a rapid pace, driven by the changes of the consumer behaviors or by the advancement in the technology, or as changes in the environmental regulations. In terms of opportunity, I think that we are considering those changes a clear opportunity to make our operations even better. And we are already heavily investing in digital transformation for our company in order to keep the pace with innovation and with very rapid changes that are happening in terms of consumer behavior. So I consider that we will see in the future the fact that creating the right organizational setup and maintaining focus on the digital projects will be one of the main directions for our company. To remain competitive, I think it's crucial for companies to continuously seek to improve and to innovate. So digital transformation, I think that is not just another project to be implemented in the company, but I think that is a project actually that is doesn't have a beginning and an end. At the core of the organization. I think that will be one of the big opportunities for our company in the future.
Well, right. In the beginning of the pandemic, I have to admit that I've seen many articles stretching on the very need to innovate for specifically for oil and gas sector because obviously work at home means less driving. And that makes the profit of oil and gas basically going down if they don't innovate as much. So thank you for sharing that vision. Obviously, digital transformation needs to be at the core of things. And I will turn now to Mr. Iskander for a vision of an international company that is not from the EU, that is present in Romania, Cosmonine Gaz Rompetrol. And obviously, with the very same question, how did you see the pandemic challenging your line of business? Not so different than MOL. And where do you see the opportunities lying forward? Is it also digitization? Is it more than digitization? And obviously, organizing the line of business so that it sustains the growth in facing another crisis, another shocks. So please tell us your vision on this. Thank you.
Antonia, thank you, and thank you for having me here today at Bucharest Forum. I will try to address the actual question on the implication of COVID on the energy security from a perspective of a downstream player who is active in Romania and who is active in the region, particularly from an oil and gas sector and from a company who is actually producing oil products. And to do that properly, I would suggest to take one step back so that we can take a look at what the situation was like from an energy point of view before the pandemic started. So generally, on a normal year, Romania would import from 8 to 9 million tons of crude oil inland, and Rompetrol was responsible for importing roughly 5.5 million tons out of that. With our refining capacities in Romania, with Petromedia and Vega refinery, we were generally capable of covering around 70% of the inland demand in the country. Now, that was the story before the COVID, in the pre-COVID era, and what we have seen happening in the course of the last few months. Since March and until May, we witnessed a sharp drop in the demand for oil products, obviously due to the lockdowns, to the overall oversupply of the market. That in turn had obviously negative implications for the downstream, both in Romania and for European region in general. So how we as an organization and as a business sort of adjusted and tried to adjust to the situation. What we see other players in Europe are doing and the route that we have taken, we've obviously reduced our run rate at Petromedia refinery to approximately 70%. We managed to complete our turnaround at spring within the initial established schedule and in the midst of the pandemics, and luckily we managed to do that without any COVID cases. We are now currently running at the sort of lower run rate, just as the majority of the players. And so far, it is apparent that the measures that all other players in the downstream sector are not sufficient to address the disbalances of the market. The Europe in general is the market which has an excessive refining capacities and is extremely competitive market from that point of view. And that COVID situation actually distorted it even to a greater extent. So generally, I think the players who are operating refineries are experiencing a turbulence, to say the least. Obviously, nobody knows when the situation will get resolved, and currently, this is the sort of hard stuff that we addressed in the circumstances. Now, speaking, there are a number of areas in which we can address how the company and how we as a business reacted to the current situation, including the adjusting the modus operandi, so how we work, safety measures, our CSR responsibility, and in terms of opportunity. I mean, we are obviously seeking an opportunity in any crisis, and in the circumstances, we're also building our sort of investment portfolio via the Romanian Investment Fund, and one of the projects which actually will contribute into the energy security of Romania is the cogeneration power plant that we are envisaging to launch in March 2023. So my key point here was the following: to tackle specifically the issue on the energy security. It looks like the threat is not coming from the supply part. We generally are of the view that if the situation persists for some time or much longer, the threat will be coming from some of the players who are operating refineries having to go off the market or to readjust the focus of their activity. So that's where the actual threat is coming from. There are no issues currently with the supply of oil products in Romania. In fact, it's the other way around. So I think this is a common view in the market. I mean, the players who will not be able to weather through the storm will have to adjust and basically shift their activity. In the circumstances, what I can say, I mean, our key focus is around our key assets, and our key assets, of course, our people, our employees, and our staff. And we're doing our best and applying all our efforts to make sure that they feel safe, that they operate in a safe environment, that they feel safe in terms of having work and not letting them. So this is the sort of long-term strategy in the circumstances. Yeah. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Understood, and thank you for telling us more about the line of business, and also underlining that the threat is not coming from the supply, but is coming from, well, more of the markets, I would say. That allows me the opportunity to actually turn back with a larger question, and one that we kept asking on panels about energy security. That relates to infrastructure, and I would like to ask Mr. Kiritoyo and Mr. Mayat first of all, but also you two, on how do you see infrastructure going, considering not only the pandemic, because obviously life continues during the pandemic and after the pandemic, but considering the challenges and the transformations that our way of life has changed, not only due to the pandemic, but overall digitization, integration, if we take into account the European Union, and also regional challenges, where we basically have two kinds of market within the European market. One that has been emerging and has been, in a sense, accelerating its innovation in Central and Eastern Europe, and one that is seeing other kinds of technological innovation for progress, and that has an overall integrated market, even when it comes to energy infrastructure. So the very specific question is, where do you see the risks coming when we are talking about the infrastructure in the energy field in the following 5 years, 5 to 10 years, considering what you've already commented on European Union plans for the future, including Green Deal? And the pause for technology actually allows me to tell those that are watching and say thank you, but also ask them to ask questions. They will reach me. If you ask questions on all channels, I will be able to see them in a chat box that our colleagues have put together and allowed me to see and check. Thank you.
Well, I changed location, so hopefully I have a better connection. So who should start?
Yes. Yes. If you want to start, please.
Well, I'll say more from a Romanian perspective. I think our main challenge is that the mindset not adapted to the realities of technology. We largely think energy to be a national market in terms of gas, electricity. Increasingly is not, and it should not be. It should not be because it's cheaper than you could get resilience cheaper if you have an integrated European market. So what we have to do in Romania is to have better connection, both in gas, this is on the way, but also in electricity. And also we need the regulatory system to adapt to this. And here energy agency at the European level has a role to play to help the regulatory agencies in Europe to cooperate one with another and to have a system that we monitor the market developments. I mean, specifically the remit. So I think these two things are important. One, to have the physical infrastructure that allows to have the flow of energy and to have the regulatory framework this energy market.
Mr. Mayet, besides that or supporting that, please do comment on my question of how do we make it work, basically, for the future?
No, I support what Mr. Kelly to you said. I think that's indeed what we need, the right connections and the right market framework. And that is very important, the right regulatory framework. Perhaps if you could allow me to develop a little bit on this question of the infrastructure and the risk linked to supply or not. I think it's interesting also to, as regards the gas sector and the supply of gas, that's interesting to look at the latest simulation done by the European Association of Transmission System Operator for Gas, so-called ENSOG, who regularly publish outlook, and they just published a few weeks ago the outlook for the next winter. This latest simulation shows that now the European gas system is much more resilient than the previous years, and that is in particular thanks to the transit agreement with Ukraine last year, which is of course a good news for the European energy security and for the Romanian energy security. But this last simulation also does not exclude that under certain scenario of a disruption of supply or very high demand, Romania could still be exposed to demand curtailment, for instance. And I think that this risk has to be addressed. It can be addressed in the framework of the regulation on the security of gas supply, through which Romania, like all other member states, must agree solidarity arrangements with its neighbors to supply gas to the protected customers in case of crisis. And that, I think that's important to properly apply this regulation. And of course, this also raises the question of the connections. The connection with Bulgaria, with Hungary, and the reverse flow, which must be fully effective, and there are still some work to be done in this area. But this is more for the short term, I would say. For the longer term, at European level, including in Romania and the region, we need to rethink the trans-European network policy, to redefine priorities, taking into account the new objectives of the European Green Deal. That means much more electrification. That means thinking in terms of decarbonization of gas, thinking in terms of smart grids and new technologies. And this process is ongoing, and then the Commission is preparing a review of the regulation of the Trans-European Network for energy. And that is clear that the right infrastructure for this green transition in the energy sector, that's a question of financing first, putting in place the right regulatory framework to attract investors. But there are also non-financial, non-market barriers, like for instance permitting, and the procedures related to the permitting, which also must be streamlined and simplified.
Well, before asking, I actually have a question from a journalist, which ties with your question. So I'm going to take the liberty to actually ask a follow-up question from Bogdan Nicolae from Mediafax, who basically asks, before jumping to the fully electric cars, and this is related to the energy mix very much, why not exploring the mix of natural gas, hydrogen on modern and less polluting cars? And obviously, he's also asking about the differences between Western Europe and Eastern Europe when we are talking about innovation and when we are talking about the energy mix. And he's asking how the European Commission could stimulate innovation so that we enlarge the hydrogen community and include virtually all the member states. If you'd like, I can wait a few minutes for you to think about this question, or we can just jump into it. Whatever you prefer. I still have questions for the other two panelists to go on, so your choice here if you'd like a bit of time to give the chance of the others to answer.
I think that will be fair
Okay.
to the other panelists the opportunity also to comment on the innovation because they are the business and they are the one to innovate.
Actually, this is my question. It ties with my question to them because it's the business sector here. Mrs. Camelia, you said about digitization, and we are also talking here about going from point A to point B, if you'd like, in terms of delivering and in terms of consuming. So what do you think is the next step for the business line when it comes to transforming and innovating, not only in producing energy, but also in delivering energy? How is it different? Because you are both, you are on several markets. How do you see it different in Eastern Europe from the other markets that you are present in?
Okay, thank
you.
you.
Or is it different?
So, please.
Okay, Mrs. Anna, do you still hear us?
Okay. I think that we are having a little bit of delay. That's why I couldn't hear completely your question. So, as I said, we are currently facing an unprecedented challenges, pandemic that is already affecting everybody and whose immediate consequences have been an economic crisis where both decline in demand and multitude of supply are present at the same time. This crisis has practically showed us how quickly habits can change, and I think it's reasonable to believe that our world could be changed forever. So preventive measures, I think that will not disappear, and consumer habits will certainly be more connected to safety, and it will change the way that we are traveling, the way that we are, or the where to stop on our ways, and exactly what to buy. Our aspiration is to leverage more groups' market expertise or size and knowledge in order to provide the best services to people on the move and actually to take part of this representation of transport in the region and to offer competitive industrial services. Therefore, we are currently transforming our retail business into a mobility service provider to offer the most desired services to our customers. And here we are talking at the regional level, not related to Romania, about services like car sharing or electric mobility and the operation of vehicle fleet or solutions for public transportation in the cities. As relates to more Romania, because we are also activating and we are a stronger player on the retail fuel market, I can say that our vision is that for the next up to 10 years, that our stations used today mainly for refueling will become service providers for those who are in the move. And here I'm talking about, again, electrical vehicles or even the food segments that is increasing very with high figures in the last year. So actually we are already prepared for those changes, and our goal is to keep up with the innovations and with the new customers behaviors that are a continuous changing process.
Okay, well, thank you very much for this. Mr. Iskander, do you want to add something relating to the innovation and also
Sure, yes.
a bit, a bit shorter because it's almost getting close to an end, but we will get back to the roundup. Yeah.
Clear. I'll just try to tackle or try to address the question that was raised. Basically, is why are we not stimulating other sort of alternative fuel sources for fleet, and the particular question about hydrogen. From what we see, the situation even in Europe is developing is developing differently. In this part of Europe, we do not see hydrogen as something that customer is currently preferring, and the infrastructure is not there for it. Basically, our strategy here is to follow the customer's needs. We're talking about alternative fuel energy. We, of course, are following the trend of installing electrical chargers at our stations, and see a huge potential in that direction. As to the hydrogen, I've seen that being more pronounced trend in France, but not as much in the eastern part of the Europe. And to be honest, at the end of the day, we will follow whatever the technology and the customer preferences lead us to. And for the moment, it's really difficult to say where is it likely to go. And we can spend a lot of time debating on the speed of sort of conversion from combustion engines to alternatively fueled vehicles. But I would assume we don't have that much time for that.
That is true. Well, if any of you want to comment anything on this line of thought about innovation, I think our public will very much appreciate. And if that is under 2 minutes, even better.
Okay.
Anyone? Yeah.
I'll jump in very shortly. Europe is looking for its big idea because Europe is not used to be the leading in car industry. Maybe Europe was the leading economic player. On electric cars, we are not. On batteries, we are not. We are more trying to catch up with China and US. So maybe, and Europe needs or is looking. I'm not needs, but anyway, is looking for something that you could propel European industry in the forefront of innovation. Yeah. So maybe hydrogen is this. I hear a lot about hydrogen coming from Brussels, and in Romania, we're trying to adapt the network. Now, if you look at this support scheme from the government to expand the gas network, we are allowing there for hydrogen-proofed equipments, pipelines. Yeah, so we are maybe not quickly enough, but we are moving in that direction in Romania also.
Got it. Well, that's a very important point. Mr. Mayant, do you want to add anything about the European Commission and how the European Commission is or is planning to support the balancing act on innovation between the eastern part of Europe and the western Europe? Because obviously there are two visions, while we are each looking for the success, for what will drive us into tomorrow's technology.
In fact, when you look at the European budgets, you can see that the budget for innovation, the EU budget for innovation, is the second budget after the agricultural policy. That is the second budget for the European Union. So a very impressive amount of money. I don't have the last figure. It's in the order of 100 billion euro for the next 7 years for innovation, and this is precisely to reduce this is precisely to address the innovation gap between member states, create a synergy, scale economies in our efforts on research and development, and also create common goals. And in particular, one of the priorities of the new innovation program, research and innovation program, is called Horizon Europe. That's called Cluster 5, and that's on energy, climate, and transport. And this is precisely to address what we are discussing now. So as regards more specifically hydrogen, which was mentioned by one of the questions, the Commission proposed during the last summer a strategy to deploy hydrogen. That's a sort of industrial master plan for Europe for hydrogen. And for instance, the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance is the clear remit to build a pipeline of viable projects from the different member states. And member states and the industry, the operators, the users can use this alliance. They can use the Horizon Europe program that I mentioned. They can use also the recovery and resilience facility that I mentioned in my introduction. So different funding instruments, including from the European Investment Bank, to propose projects which can go ahead and contribute also to the green transition in the energy sector.
Well, I think this is an excellent way to actually end the round of questions and our panel by underlying what the opportunities are. And we are actually out of the pandemic as we are thinking ahead and as we are thinking about what innovation may bring to the sector and to the sector security and obviously the security of society, because this is what we are talking about when we're talking about energy security, in fact. I would like to thank you all. I am sorry we cannot invite our public for a coffee break this year and for exchanging views over coffee on energy security, but I'm sure that there will be chances to do so in the next years. And with this, thank you very much to our distinguished guests that have shared with us not only about the challenges that we are going through, and this sort of static thought on what we are going to accomplish during the pandemic, in the sense that the European Union is still on the way that was before the pandemic, and giving us hope with some words on innovation and how Europe supports innovation and how businesses can support innovations as we are going through difficult periods. Thank you very much all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.